We we're gonna aim to start in about 4 minutes. So if you're out getting coffee, we're gonna try to jump right into this second panel to get back on time.
If people could start sitting down, we're going to start in about 2 minutes, please. If you could start sitting down, we're going to start in about 2 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start off on the second panel. Okay, as you can see, the second panel is on immigration resettlement issues. The moderator is Professor Catherine Donato, a distinguished scholar with the School of Foreign Service here in Georgetown University. Catherine, thank you so much for taking your time to moderate this. Thank you.
Is the microphone working? Yeah? Okay, great. Okay, so after really a remarkable morning session, we're now shifting gears a bit to talk about the current state of Afghan resettlement in the United States and the ongoing challenges, and hopefully we'll hear from some of the experts about recommendations for the future. So I'm going to start by asking each of our panelists a question, and we'll just start one after another. And each of them will answer that question to the extent they can in the limited time. And then we'll move forward with a deeper discussion. And please forward any of your questions to the organizers, and I will also weave them in. So our first speaker is Farishta Sakhi, and she is the Senior Program Officer, or Senior Program Manager at Freedom House for Afghan Human Rights. So Farishta, we've talked before. Could you tell us a little bit about the macro level conditions related to displacement in the region, and give us a sense of how many people have left, both in the formal evacuation moment of a year ago as well as more generally?
Thank you very much, Professor Catherine, for the introduction. It's indeed a great honor to speaking with you all today. Thank you for coming to this session. I think after the first morning session, it's really hard for me to talk, because as I was watching to the chaotic scene in Kabul, it kind of triggered all those emotions, and it kind of brought back all those memories of Afghan tragedy and Afghan crisis. It's unfortunate that this is the third wave of Afghan refugee crisis happening in the recent history. UNHCR has marked Afghanistan as a country with refugee population of like the third largest refugee population in the world. Unfortunately, 6 million people have been displaced, and with 3.5 inside Afghanistan internally displaced, and 2.6 million people outside of Afghanistan has been displaced, especially with the chaotic events of the fall of Kabul. Before that, also, we had a huge population of refugees around the globe. But unfortunately, the fall of Kabul, the Taliban takeover, the lack of trust on the Taliban de facto government, and other factors, including COVID, including humanitarian crisis, as many of us in this space understand the severity of economic crisis in Afghanistan, where more than 93% people live below the poverty line. These are all contributing factors for Afghans to flee their homes. And during the last year, specifically, if we talk about this phase, unfortunately, Taliban could not or did not keep their promises. They continue to arbitrarily arrest people, torture people, harass people, and do bring lots of oppression and suppression against women, girls, ethnic and religious minorities, which all have contributed towards the Afghan population fleeing their homes. So the situation is dire. Most of these people who have sought refuge outside of the borders are the highest population lives in Pakistan and Iran. They have been graciously hosting Afghan refugees for more than now 4 decades. And with this new influx of refugees, I think it's getting really hard for many countries to respond to such an abrupt influx of population. So So I will stop here, and I'll just restate that the situation is extremely dire. There are only 98 countries who have partially or in a very limited manner accepted the Afghan refugees. And those who have accepted the Afghan refugees, fortunately, there are many good programs happening around the resettlement. But unfortunately, Afghan refugees are still facing threats, illegal arbitration, and forced deportation, and also a lot of ill treatment and discrimination for getting access to education, health, and employment opportunities. So it's not a very favorable environment in terms of resettlement for Afghan refugees, especially during these last 1 year.
So the pressures certainly remain in Afghanistan and perhaps have grown in the last year for many who seek to leave or who try to leave and perhaps arrive somewhere. It's not clear. They arrive to the US, that's one story, but they can arrive in a variety of settings and places, which may or may not mean they're deported or they can really sustain themselves and their families. So let's now move to Wida, Saber, Popal. And Wida is one of the new Afghans who has arrived in the United States after being evacuated. And I thought it would be really important to hear her story and her experience about her resettlement, leaving Afghanistan, arriving in the US, and what has happened since.
Thank you so much, Professor Katrine. Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. It's my honor today that I have this opportunity today that I can speak among all of you. For centuries, the United States of America has been shining because of hope and freedom for millions of people around the world. Immigrants have come to this country in the search of the American dream. And in return, they have built the American that we live in today. It has been more than hundreds of years that United States has been home for immigrants and welcoming them. This country has been built by the immigrants. The truth of this country and the root of this country is immigrations. Afghan evacuees are US allies. They have served the US military and the US government over 2 decades. They have fought alongside the US military against international terrorism. They vouched for women's rights, human rights, hope, and peace. And they have fought for not only Afghanistan security, for the all around the world and United Nations security. The US government evacuated thousands of Afghans, allies to the US and other countries to bring them in safe haven. As a US Gov ally who was evacuated and paroled to the US, I want to share my story with all of you today that I never try to share with public or might be out of my circle of friends. So, it was August 15, around 10 a.m. My phone rang. It was my mother asking me to come home as soon as possible. I told her that I can't because my schedule's booked all day. She said, everyone says that Taliban took over Kabul and there's a chaos in wild city. After hearing my mom's shaky voice, I got worried. Within few minutes of that call, the security guards came, asked us to evacuate the offices as soon as we can. We left the office without collecting our personal belongings. As our vehicles was approaching the north of Kabul, I witnessed Taliban entering the city, my city, Kabul city, with their tanks fully armed. I was shocked by seeing their scary faces. I was told to cover my face entirely with my scarf so they wouldn't recognize me. For the sake of me and my family's life safety, we kept our cell phones turned off and completely avoided with others. Me and my family members were hiding ourselves. Fast forward to August 25th, when we received call from our American friends ask us to make our way to Kabul airport, that I don't want to mention his name here, but I will be always thankful of him. To get to the airport, I used taxi. I covered my face entirely again, so they don't know who I am. I cannot speak about the airport situation because I still have a flashback and nightmares from those scenes. We were evacuated to Doha, Qatar, by the military plans. For more than 46 hours, we did not eat and drink. We were taken to a military camp which looked like a huge warehouse. And there were about 5,000 evacuees in one warehouse. I also lost my cell phone, which was my only way of contacting my family. After about 4 nights, our turn came to fly to Dallas Airport, then to Fort McCoy in Wisconsin, Army base. We had to stay at the military base for about 5 months to be resettled. After going through this traumatic experience, I have firsthand witnessed it to following issues that I experienced it, and the most of Afghan evacuees as an immigrant experienced this. First, Afghan evacuees who have resettled in Washington region area and overall in the United States, after fleeing the Taliban, are now struggling to pay their rent and the stove of eviction by their landlords. And housing is the big concern for all of Afghan immigrants right now. Grappling with unemployment and exhausting the limited government aid they have received. Local activists and resettlement agencies always say in news when we met them that the depression rate is going up with those families, especially with the isolated families. Lack of proper management in Kabul airport has caused migrant children to have without parents. For example, 6-year-old Basit, 12-year-old Samim, 7-year-old Bigzad, and 9-year-old Tamim, 16-year-old Muqaddisa, and hundreds of fathers alone without their children, hundreds of mothers alone without their kids right now in the United States. Be clear, I'm not explaining the Hollywood movie scene here. I'm talking about the real scene and tragedy in the United States. And the lack of access of those families to mental health service makes this situation more critical and worse. All the evacuees are eligible for food stamp, although some they say that they haven't received it yet. They can also qualify for TANF, temporary assistance for needy families, benefit and a federal matching grant program with resettlement. Some of the resettlement agencies appear to be backing under the heavy load of clients. When the evacuees arrived after the fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban in August, each one received $1,225. In the US, the State Department welcome money meant to help them gain foothold in this country by covering basic expenses, including housing, clothing, and diapering, for about 3 months. But some immigrants, evacuees, have a complaint that they never received this money. Most of the resettlement agencies appear to be buckling under the heavy load of clients, and it's normal that we expected sometimes poor services. Legal status. I'm sure all of us in this hall heard about humanity parole. USCIS announced humanity parole for all Afghans, that they are eligible for urgent seek of protection. But unfortunately, the most of evacuees and also the most of people who are eligible in Afghanistan, they couldn't receive the humanity parole. We have only 164 applications accepted by the USCIS. Right now in Afghanistan, more than 20 million people are eligible for humanitarian parole. But we hear nothing from USCIS office, and they collect money from all Afghans who are in need of urgent seek of protection under $20 million. But still, no one have heard positive response. Professor Cady, if I'm running the time, please, 1 minute more, okay. The asylum case is the biggest issue of the Afghan immigrants in here, especially for isolated families who couldn't see their children for more than 5 or 6 years. And this is horrible, because every child deserves to stay with their family. As well, the reunification of the families, humanity parole, AAA, Afghan Adjustment Acts are the big concern of Afghan evacuees in here. The most important thing that I want to mention in my 1 minute, Afghan evacuees, refugee involvement in resettlement process, they should be included in a paper policy and survey, and feedback should be taken from them in order for funds to be allocated accordingly. As the time goes by, I don't want our stories to fade away and the world to forget Afghan allies and the Afghan nation in general. The struggling of Afghan evacuees facing challenges and rising daily. I call on US nation and US government to honor its allies and the sacrifice they have made, risking their lives serving US troops. And please, 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 don't leave Afghan girls and women against international terrorism to fight alone for their education rights.
Thank you. Wida's comments certainly have highlighted a number of serious concerns, but especially about the resettlement process in the US, what happens after people are able to leave. So along those lines, I want to begin with Kari McDonough. She is Senior Advisor to Welcome.us and is in the broad policy space, and she will begin the next 3 actually commentaries, people who will have some very specific things to say about the challenges in resettlement, what really happens, and then what works, what doesn't work.
Great, thanks, Catherine, and
Thanks, John and Jason Tito, for putting together this powerful event, and it's great to be up here with you all. And first of all, I just want to acknowledge that each of you in this room have some deep knowledge about the key challenges facing our nonprofits as we focus on resettlement. It has been a long year. People are exhausted. Budgets are slim, and the work is far from over. And yet, while the challenges are many, I want to slightly reframe the question, Catherine, and step back and acknowledge what has been accomplished by our nonprofits and our private sector this past year. First, for context, in 2020, the U.S. received 11,411 refugees. That was 2 years ago. And just now, we are on track to receive 190,000 newcomers. That's a 20 times increase. When our Afghan crisis hit a year ago, it was a challenge that absolutely exceeded the capacity of our resettlement infrastructure, which at its most robust point had taken in 85,000 newcomers and over a course of a year. And here we had 80,000 arriving in a matter of weeks and months. And as a result, many organizations like those in this room today stepped up and worked overtime to provide wraparound support in the work of resettlement. Some of those organizations were ones that had been in this space for many years, but many more were ones that were born out of this crisis or totally repurposed with a new mission to focus on the work of welcoming our Afghan newcomers. I do want to highlight the incredible work of many of our veteran-led efforts that worked round the clock, as we heard on the past panel, to facilitate evacuation efforts, and then expanded their focus to help with resettlement here in the United States. And those groups are No One Left Behind, IAVA, Afghan Partnership, Save Our Allies, the community-based efforts of Veterans Bridge Home in Charlotte and Combined Arms in Houston. Incredible work. In addition to the diverse work going on in nonprofits and communities across the country, we've also had huge civic and faith-based organizational participation. We've had groups like the Lions Club step in. We've had faith-based groups, Samaritan's Purse, Islamic Relief, USA play a role. We've had churches, synagogues, and mosques really work to mobilize their members. We've also had a new option here. The federal government has implemented a mechanism that has enabled a program called sponsorship. We've seen this with our Ukraine newcomers, but we have a sponsor circle program where 5 or more Americans can privately sponsor an Afghan family. Within a matter of months of this program going live, hundreds of Afghans were privately resettled by Americans throughout our country. I want to highlight also the role of the private sector, which really has not played a strong role in resettlement in the near past. We've had 40 leading CEOs come together on the Welcome CEO Council, and they've provided over $240 million in goods. They've mobilized their employee networks. They've engaged their consumers to donate housing, to donate flights and household supplies. We've had stories like HP donating Chromebooks. It's my understanding that a number of those Chromebooks came to the Georgetown Institute of Women, working with some of our Afghan newcomers. Google donated 30,000 phones. T-Mobile donated 100,000 year-round service plans. The demand was so great that they increased that by another 100,000.
So all to say, I think that what we have seen is incredible American participation. It's estimated that 54 million Americans have already participated in an act of welcoming newcomers this past year, over the past 12 months. And an additional 36 million would like to help, but don't yet know how. So the challenges are deep, they're troubling, the system is imperfect, it still remains imperfect. But I think what we've also seen and witnessed through this year is the incredible participation of the American people. Thanks, Catherine.
The scaling up, I just want to highlight one of your first points. The scaling up of the refugee resettlement system after it was brought down almost to zero, as you suggested, really, it typically takes a lot of time to do that because you're relying on national organizations to work with subnational and all the way down to the very local level. This is not an easy thing to scale up or, frankly, to scale down. And it was scaled all the way down, and then the demand was more intense, let's say, than anyone, I think, in refugee resettlement ever expected. So that was the challenge, and I agree. There's been a fair, really, I think, an exceptional kind of involvement, the private sector involvement before the Afghan evacuation. We had not seen that kind of involvement by the private sector going back to right after World War II. So that was pretty exceptional. Nonetheless, I'm sure we will talk about the complexity here a bit more. So I want to introduce Sarah Cady. She is Executive Director for Refugees and Immigrant Services at Lutheran Social Services. So I will as well ask you a similar question, but given that Lutheran Social Services is on the ground, and if you could kind of give us a sense at the ground level, grassroots level, what both some of the challenges are and what some of the opportunities have been.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much, and thank you to Global Friends of Afghanistan for the opportunity to speak today. And to the first panel, thank you so much. I am deeply grateful for all of you for bringing our Afghan allies to safety. We support the ongoing work, and we meet with the families every day who are deeply concerned about their loved ones overseas. So thank you on behalf of my agency and my staff. Many of my staff are evacuees themselves who have risen to the occasion to serve our new neighbors, and they are missing families at home, and so doing difficult work while you're worried about your loved ones. I'm just, again, so deeply appreciative of all of you. I want to start and just set the scene a little bit about what work in Northern Virginia, and I'm sure Seyoum will speak to this as well, looked like last August. Because of our proximity to Dulles Airport and the large existing Afghan population in Northern Virginia, we saw an unprecedented humanitarian crisis on U.S. soil, I think really that the U.S. had not seen since Vietnam. So I was deployed from LIRS headquarters to LSS-NCA last August. I was in a little church basement in Fairfax when we were watching the images that you just told us about arise, and the Afghan community that had already been living in Northern Virginia came with deep concerns about their family. When the bombing occurred, we had several families arrive to see me and to ask what we could do for their families. And similar to the frustrations that you indicated, there was very little that I could do except say that I will put you on the Human Rights First evacuation list, and you should tell your family not to move toward the airport. It was a feeling of helplessness that I recognize that all of you on that first panel have, and it's deeply frustrating. What we did do in those first weeks, as you're aware, the Afghan Parole Assistance Program was not officially a program for the first, I want to say 6 to 8 weeks as we watched those images. So many Afghan allies directly left Dulles Airport and did not go to a military base. It was not required for them to go, and based on the fact that they wanted to be with their family and friends in Northern Virginia, they oftentimes arrived at our door with the one article of clothing that they were wearing when they evacuated. I had a family come in that the mom was 9 months pregnant. She arrived in my office on Wednesday and gave birth on Saturday. She had no understanding of the American medical system. For the first 6 weeks after the fall of Afghanistan, our humanitarian parolee allies were not eligible for any federal benefits. So they could not access food stamps, they could not access TANF, they could not access Medicaid. So she birthed in an American hospital with no access to any services. We had families arrive with 1 dose of life-saving insulin. It was, like I said, I have been in resettlement for 20 years, and it was unlike anything I had ever seen. So we are deeply proud of the work that we did in those first days to rise to the occasion to meet really the life-saving needs of a group of people that stood by us and our troops and our NGOs for 20 years. So in terms of ongoing challenges, the ones that I want to highlight specifically to this area are self-sufficiency. So as you know, the cost of living in the DC metro area is extremely high. A studio or a 1-bedroom is going for between $1,500 and $1,600. As you can imagine, for someone with no work history in the United States, sometimes limited English skills, that is daunting. So our biggest focus right now, and we're very grateful to our community partners for hosting job fairs, for partnering with us on employment initiatives. I'm looking at React DC, thank you. Is to find good paying jobs that will allow our Afghan allies long-term self-sufficiency options in the DMV. Now I want to give you my word, rest assured, no Afghan ally is going homeless on my watch. I promise you that, and I know Seyoum will reiterate that when he does his comments. We have ongoing long-term assistance options funded through the state of Virginia that we will provide job assistance, we will provide emergency rental assistance, we will provide opportunities for IT training, CDL training. So that's one of our biggest challenges moving forward. Another one that I want to highlight is mental health concerns among this population. While every refugee group has experienced trauma, that's more visceral in this group because of the nature of the evacuation and the images that you saw on the videos earlier. As you can imagine, if you are dealing with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, you have watched the Taliban kill your siblings, and now you are raising your nephew who you don't know particularly well, maybe have never raised a child before, work becomes extremely abstract. So what we are doing at Lutheran Social Services is we just hired a case manager on the employment team, and we are hiring, hopefully, a bilingual Afghan clinician, social worker, or counselor to help address some of these barriers to employment. We have partnered with Women for Afghan Women to send our most, the cases with the most severe mental health concerns for counseling. And again, deeply grateful for our community partners, Afghan Refugee Crisis Coalition, Muslim Association of Virginia, for helping us build our network of mental health clinicians. Those are, from my perspective, the 2 biggest challenges in resettlement right now is long-term self-sufficiency based on the cost of living in Northern Virginia and Maryland, and mental health concerns. What I am hearing from the Afghan community, as our colleagues from Welcome US mentioned, there is a real unease in the Afghan community about their status. So while we have resettled special immigrant visa holders and refugees, our largest caseload are Afghan humanitarian parolees. And while that was the safest, easiest way to evacuate thousands of people from Afghanistan, it is a troublesome legal status because it does not allow our Afghan allies a pathway to permanency. So we are optimistic that the Afghan Adjustment Act has been reintroduced in Congress, but it is still not passed. So as of today, we are moving forward with applying for asylum for thousands of our clients. We are running a series of pro se asylum clinics, which I have spearheaded, and I was watching a mock interview last night. To give you a sense, these interviews take between 4 and 5 hours, and our Afghan allies are grilled about why they are concerned about going back. They are asked to corroborate dates, which, and you know, in Afghan culture, dates are not done the way we do them here. And so if you don't know what date your marriage occurred on, or you don't know all of the dates of your children, your credibility can be questioned. So again, we would like to see the Afghan Adjustment Act passed. Our Afghan allies who've been through so much should not have to go through the tedious asylum process. I have a couple more things, but I'll pass it back to Catherine.
So our last speaker, and again, everybody will have another opportunity to speak, is Seyoum Berhe. And he is the refugee coordinator for the state of Virginia. And so if anyone has a sense of the local pulse here, it will be you. So again, if you could speak to, generally speaking, the resettlement strengths, weaknesses, but in particular, because I know a lot about this system as well, and states have to intersect with on the federal government on the one hand, but also the private sector, people, organizations, the nonprofits, the local resettlement orgs. Representing then the interests of Virginia as a state, if you could just speak to some of the complexities there and also perhaps some of the strengths, if there are some.
No stress here. Thank you, Professor, and thank you for those who organized this. It's critical. I hope we continue to do that. And the earlier panel, my God, I wasn't sure if I want to come here after the first, they were wonderful. Thank you for the service you provide this country. I want to start with something before resettlement for 1 minute. I am also responsible for what we call mass repatriation for Virginia. That is fundamentally American citizens all over the world coming back in a bigger group, and that falls under me. Well, at 4 a.m. when I was awakened to go to Dallas airport, I wasn't quite sure what the heck I was supposed to do. Thanks to Virginia VDEM, Virginia emergency people who know emergency really well. I am a very programmed person, a refugee. I've worked with refugee for 26 years, but you call me for emergency, I would not have survived, but they were great. I got to the airport. The expectation of my team and I we were going to get American citizens, mostly. After the second plane, there was almost no American citizen. And they were mixed, an American citizen, a green card holder, and somebody with absolutely nothing but a white paper with some number. And I was supposed to lead this. I'm not an immigration lawyer, although I've been to court many times with immigrants. And it was difficult. Without going into the detail, because some of you here probably were there, and I had USA hat and a T-shirt, so that's where I was. And I told my team, when you say welcome to USA, the verbiage is not enough. Show it in your eyes, in your body. That was my first instruction. I want to give you one example how painful and yet how hopeful, as America is in essence, this was. I met with thousands of people, but one gentleman I never forget, 6 foot something, really big guy, with an 11 or 12-year-old child. He was paying very close attention to his son, who was physically, you can tell, confused, scared. And I just went outside of the circle and started talking to him. He spoke good English. And I said, how are you doing? Is everything okay? Well, I have to pay attention to my son. He watched me get beat up by Taliban. And I almost totally broke down. As this guy had tears in his eye, big guy, and telling me, still protecting his son, who have seen his dad, this big guy, get beat up by some idiots who have guns. And full disclosure, I came from a country where that happens a lot. I'm sure you understand that there is an accent. I lived in New York, but I have said many times, this is not New York accent, by the way. So I was born in Tigray, if you haven't heard that. I haven't spoken to my family for 2 years, so I was so thankful. And I wrote a small piece on my Facebook when I got home. By the way, I was at the airport for a long time until we closed the shop. And Red Cross coffee tasted so good because sleep was not something we were too worried about. So I get it. So I got home and I wrote, the country where I was born would have killed me today, but my adopted country gave me an opportunity to serve the people who are going to what I should have been going to. I trust that, I believe that through my born, that while the challenges are here, and I will touch on those, I want us to focus on the possibilities of the greatness of this nation. What an amazing project this nation is. To me, as someone who was born somewhere else in literally hell-bent country, now with this freedom, I can't help but to really look at this, even this, in a very positive way. So what do we do? Back to your question, I'm sorry. The federal government funds us to provide money to resettlement agencies so that they can provide self-sufficiency employment. This year, the federal government gave us money to fund agencies for housing. I was very fortunate because federal government, I do want to say good things about federal government today, because we always see the mistakes they make. But for the first time in my 26 years working in this business, they actually came to the ground with us. The real collaboration and cooperation was real when it comes to Afghan parolee services. So I was able to fund agencies assisting clients for rent for 9 months. That never have happened ever in my career. We also funded for employment, funded for school projects, funded for mentoring, but we can't fund ourselves out of this. It's difficult. There are barriers. The feds have done well. This is one of the only year I can say that. And they really have done well. We were able to distribute the money appropriately. We are monitoring. I do promise we're not going to watch one Afghan parolee homeless. We are really trying hard with all the weaknesses, but we're really trying the best, and we have agencies. I have what we call Virginia Community Capacity Initiative all over the state, meaning we bring stakeholders, businesses, volunteers, faith-based organizations, government officials coming together, talking the unmet needs, how they can help, how can they recruit volunteers, so that this is a community work, not just federal and state. One more thing. I used to get some not so friendly phone calls in the years before. Why are you bringing these terrorists? And I have really nothing to do with bringing anybody, by the way. My responsibility is in Virginia. I'm here to tell you not one single phone call, negative phone call about Afghan parolees. Not one. where I used to get one a day. I get phone calls. I have a basement. How can I help you? Except it's really way out in a village. Well, I don't think my Afghan friends want to go that far. But it shows the American spirit. That's where I want to focus. The challenge, the biggest challenge, besides employment and school and everything, the biggest challenge, my fear, if you ask me what keeps you up at night, mental health. We got to pay attention. We haven't seen nothing yet. The way the cultural norms in Afghanistan is completely different how you raise your child. Gender equity, I force agencies, and my friend here knows, to pay attention to gender equity. Show me how many women you have trained, how many women you have got jobs. I know you're looking at me, you're a man, what's your, well, I was born from a mother. That's I want you to know that. So we try to make sure parents who have sacrificed everything for their children, that kids get the best education possible. We want to make sure gender equity is real, but I'm here to tell you, we are not funding a lot of money on mental health. This is a message for my good friends at the federal government. We're going to pay very high price tomorrow if we don't invest today. And I think, did I pass my minutes? I should shut up now. Okay.
Well, I think the theme of mental health came out in the first session. It's absolutely critical to find more funding. I don't know if the federal government can be the source of all the funding that's needed for mental health services for refugees and for Afghans who have come in. But if they're not, then I'm hoping the private sector and other people will step up, because you're right, there's a long-term cumulative effect that a lot of this trauma has on individual people's ability to grow and develop into, contributing adults. And all right, I want to switch gears because of a card that I received and ask everyone on the panel briefly. We don't have much time. I've just been informed that the Biden administration has announced while we were meeting that they will no longer allow Afghans to be eligible for humanitarian parole. So although humanitarian parole, as you suggested, Wida, and others, was not a good program, some would say a failing program for Afghans, if we could just go briefly through everyone here, what is your reaction, immediate reaction to this news?
I think definitely, my mic is working?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think definitely the reaction is not positive. It's shocking, because we are not only dealing with a lot of cases here, but we have a lot of people who are left behind. We have so many, working with Freedom House and working with Human Rights Coordination Mechanism. On daily basis on these calls, we receive a lot of requests from human rights defenders, women protesters, people who were the civil society leaders at risk and who kind of escaped or fled Taliban violence and persecution. And there is a grave need to support them. So not only we need to expedite the support, whether these are the new legislations, Afghan Adjustment Act, and any other avenues, not only in the US, but also in the European countries and in the neighboring states or neighboring countries of Afghanistan. We need to speed up, or we need to enhance or improve these resettlement mechanism and pathways, but we also have to open up more arms and welcome more Afghans, because we know that threats are very much existent. They are very much severe currently inside Afghanistan. Economic situation is getting dire, and needs are definitely, obviously, very, very acute. So, I would urge governments and also those who are the policymakers to really take Afghan cases or Afghan situation or deal it the same way it has, the world has responded to the crisis in Ukraine.
Sarah?
Sure. No, of course it's disappointing, but we've not really been using that program much because it's my understanding that it's been, you applied and then waited and waited and waited. So I think we should focus on what we can do, which is advocate for the Afghan Adjustment Act, help people finish their SIV applications. There's a large number of people who, again, heartbreaking, who would come off the military bases and say to me, I'm an SIV, I'm an SIV, and I would look at their documentation, and they are in fact not an SIV. They are an Afghan humanitarian parolee, which affects everything. And then when the AAA passes, hopefully if it passes, then when you're able to adjust status, we can look at bringing eligible family members through that route.
And you're helping people apply for asylum.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
As another alternative,
Absolutely.
right?
In the
Although
interim.
that's difficult, as you suggested.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Seyoum?
I think I usually don't comment on the federal regulations
Oh, well, you don't have to.
Politically, but from the clients, from the Afghan friends, it's painful. It's also painful, I do want to say this, which was a phenomenal idea to bring Afghan allies here. We brought them here under Afghan parolee program, and now they have to apply for asylum. Logically, it's a very difficult thing for me to swallow. But right now, it's painful, but let's focus, I would say again, let's focus on what can be done, what we can do while it is disappointing. But for us, in Virginia at least, we want to do the best we can right now with the capacity we have, and let Uncle Sam do what he knows to do.
It's so important, actually. Many Americans who advocate for U.S. troops withdraw from Afghanistan and ending the 2 decades partnerships in Afghanistan, they believe that with doing this, they are trying to bring the United States in a flourish international relations, and they ended the trouble of 2 decades war in Afghanistan. And it's a new beginning for the United States in international relations. What I mentioned today, it's September, 1st of September. We all remember 9/11. I called myself 9/11 generation because at the first regime of Taliban in Afghanistan in 96-7 till 2001, we were not able to go to school. I studied at my private and secret school of my mother in my father's house. When 9/11 happened, US Army came to Afghanistan, NATO forces came to Afghanistan, and we were able to go to school again. We have a fear of nest of terrorism in Afghanistan, actually. There's a Taliban and ISIS. If United States don't want, or Biden administration doesn't want support their allies by humanitarian parole, they have to figure out what will be the solution, because they trained, we had more than 300,000 military forces in Afghanistan. And we evacuated more than 123,000 people in here, or without US and other countries. If we didn't care about our other allies that trained by US Army forces, that trained by NATO forces, it will be risk. And it will be treat for the all over, for the regional, for the United States, might be for the 9/11 around the world for each and every country. It's not about the 36 million people in Afghanistan who were left behind as a hostage. And now a terrorist group blamed them that you're allies of United States, so you deserve to be killed or removed from this country. So it's so important. It's not about the national interest of Afghanistan. It's not about the international relation of Asia. United States, for about their national security, they have to be directly, indirectly involved in legal status of their allies in Afghanistan and outside of Afghanistan. Because if we leave more than 300,000 men ready for fight for the Taliban, and the Taliban is opposite side, we have another terrorist group in Afghanistan by the name of ISIS. So it's a big threat against all the world. And what about the sacrifices of thousands United States American men? Right now we heard why they sacrificed. For international terrorism, for propaganda? No, they fought for the peace. They fought for the security of the world alongside with the Afghans. So we need to balance the interest of the world. We need to balance and pay attention of our allies in Afghanistan, outside of Afghanistan. Thank you.
Kari, I will ask you that. I think that'll be the end of our session, but you will have the last word if you could just share your thoughts about this news.
I would just reiterate what has been shared on this panel today and the importance of us really mobilizing our Congress to pass the Afghan Adjustment Act is absolutely critical, and we need to be calling, again, really appreciative of our veteran community that's put so much, brought this so much to the forefront, the Afghan evac group and others, but we need to all be a part of making sure that that's past this in the next few weeks and this fall.
Yes, and so I think we can, I think we're at time. I think we'll end on that point. Please contact your congressional representatives and anyone else you know to get the Afghan Adjustment Act passed now before the end of the government's fiscal year, which is September 30th. And please help me thank all of our panelists who I think have done a remarkable job today. Thank you.
Let's take a 10-minute break and be back in here by 11:30. Thank you.